Let me tell you about some bizarre occurrences that took place recently in the remote farming community I call home. It all started one frosty November morning, when folks around town began noticing something strange happening at night. Just as the sun dipped below the horizon each evening, shadows would mysteriously vanish. Anything that cast a silhouette, trees, barns, even people, would suddenly be deprived of it come nightfall. Then when dawn broke, the shadows would return as if they'd never disappeared. At first, most shrugged it off as a passing oddity. But as week after week went by with the shadows reliably disappearing after dark, folks started getting mighty uneasy. Some took to holing up inside all night to avoid whatever sinister force was making the shadows vanish. Whispers swirled of unholy experiments taking place out at the old Merriam farm where outsiders had recently moved in. Others feared something even darker, that the devil himself was making mischief, stealing shadows to deprive folks of their souls. Most scoffed at such wild theories. But an air of foreboding settled over the town as the mystery continued. Folks eyed each other with suspicion, wondering who among them might be in league with supernatural forces. By late November, folks were fit to be tied from the relentless strangeness. That's when Mayor Lewis called an emergency town hall meeting to discuss the situation. The whole population of our little hamlet packed into the creaky pews of the church chapel to try and make sense of it all. "These disappearing shadows amount to devilry, I tell you," shouted old Mrs. Abrams, shaking a crooked arthritic finger. Other residents clamored in agreement, demanding action. Mayor Lewis appealed for calm, but admitted he was plumb flummoxed by the whole affair. "We need to keep our heads on straight if we aim to get to the bottom of this," he implored. An uneasy silence descended as minds spun with speculation. Just then, the heavy chapel doors swung open. There on the threshold stood a stranger, his angular face obscured in the shadows of a wide-brimmed hat. A hush fell over the tense gathering. "Mind if I lend a hand?" the man asked in a strange lilting accent. Before waiting for an answer, he strode down the aisle to stand before the crowd. "My name is Alistair Crowley and these vanishing shadows have plagued me as well." He spoke eloquently of studying the phenomena through scientific methods, taking measurements and observations. But after weeks of toil, he confessed no rational explanation could be found. "I sense a malevolent hand at work here," the stranger declared. "We must repel this evil before it consumes us all." His fiery words roused frightened anger in the assembled townsfolk. As the agitated mob discussed ways to fight this demonic scourge, Mayor Lewis noticed the pastor frowning. "Don't you trust this fellow?" he asked. "Quite the opposite," the pastor replied grimly. "Rider by the name of Crowley used to work for the railroad till they ran him out of town for stirring up trouble. Could be he's up to the same no good here." The mayor's eyes narrowed with concern. But before he could quiet the rowdy crowd, Mr. Crowley bellowed that he'd seen the source of the devilry hiding in the old Merriam barn. The mob took up torches and pitchforks, their fear turning to rage. The stranger now whipped them into a frenzy with talk of driving out the demon. With a roar, the horde surged through the church doors into the pitch-black night. Some sensible folk tried to halt the crazed crusade, but got swept along in the force of the crowd's passion. The night itself seemed to hold its breath as the townsfolk marched up the hill to the Merriam's isolated barn, their footsteps echoing like muted thunder. They halted at the weathered barn doors. Before anyone could reconsider, a torch sailed through the air, landing in the dry hay piled inside. Within seconds, the barn was fully engulfed, flames licking high into the black sky. The townspeople shielded their eyes against the blazing heat. Mr. Crowley cackled with delight over the bedlam. That's when screams sounded from within the burning structure, sending chills down their spines. Through the smoke and flames, shadowy forms raced out. The Merriams, a kindly older couple who kept quietly to themselves. The stranger had falsely accused them as part of some sick ruse. "No. Please help us!" shrieked Mrs. Merriam. But it was too late. The angry mob watched in horror as the elderly couple was consumed by flames. Inside the inferno, their farm animals also burned alive, their agonized squeals piercing the night. As the awful scene sunk in, the crowd turned on the deceitful stranger with rage in their eyes. But he was already galloping away on a stolen horse, his maniacal laughter hanging in the air. He had spread lies to manipulate the frightened town into destroying itself. They had played right into his hands. In the following days, a gloomy pall hung over the community. Bitterness festered as folks blamed each other for the rash actions that led to such senseless tragedy and loss. Though the shadows returned as if nothing had happened, no one felt safe anymore. Then one Sunday, the pastor gave a sermon on the deadly sins of fear, anger, and mistrust that had nearly torn the town apart. He spoke of resisting the urge to find easy scapegoats, and the strength that comes from unity, compassion, and faith in each other. His wise words resonated deeply as folks realized they'd turned on their own neighbors at the first sign of trouble. If the stranger's evil scheme had succeeded, the very soul of their tight-knit community would have been lost forever. In the aftermath, the townsfolk came together to bury the remains of the poor Merriams and rebuild their barn. Some even took in their surviving animals. While the scars of those dark times remained, the shared hardship brought a new spirit of openness and cooperation. So the town was able to heal through reflection, grace, and kindness. They erected a humble stone monument honoring the Merriams and all they'd lost. But their memory would live on through the lessons learned and friendships forged. As for the stranger who deceived them, he was never seen again in those parts. Some say his soul withered in bitterness and regret. But that is mere speculation. The truth died with him. All that remains is the lesson of his legacy. Evil takes root in fear and anger, but scatters in the light of wisdom, empathy, and truth. So ends this strange tale of forces beyond our grasp and the more sinister evils lurking within human hearts. I pray it inspires greater faith in one another during times of uncertainty and strife. For shadows come and go, but our bonds of community remain. Stay vigilant, but never abandon hope or compassion. Dark schemers rely on divides. Together, we can ensure the light prevails. Well, what did you think? I wanted to share a story about how fear can twist our perception and make us vulnerable to manipulation. But ultimately, the townsfolk learned to see through the deception by opening their hearts and minds. Of course, real life is far more complex. Still, I believe stories remind us we have a choice, to find empathy even for those labeled as other, or let fear drive us apart. I hope hearing this tale provides some food for thought about human nature and choosing light over darkness. Our world needs less dividing lines and more embracing arms. But the journey starts within, turning from fear to understanding. Change comes one heart at a time.